and thanks for stopping by my channel, A Square Pillow Isn't Square. This is the place where you will find anything and everything you wanted to know about home dec sewing. Today our video is going to be about 6 variations on a tab top window treatment. I'm showing a classic 2-inch standard tab, but I'm going to show you 5 other styles. And by changing the style of tab or loop or bow that you use to hang your window treatment, you can drastically change the look of it. This video will have instructions for a basic 2-inch tab, a 1/2-inch loop tab, a 1-inch bow, a 1/2-inch tie, a gathered tab, and a button tab. If you'd like to know how to make the valance from start to finish, I'm linking here to a video that I have about how to make this valance. All of the following instructions will work if you have a rod with a diameter of 1 3/8 inches or less. If you've got a big 2-inch wide rod or larger, you're going to want to add a couple of inches length to all of these measurements that I'm giving you. Or if you watch the video on how to make this valance from start to finish, there's instructions on how to customize the length of your tabs. So check that out if you're not sure. First up is our 2-inch standard tab. For each tab, you'll need a piece of fabric that is 5 inches wide and 7.5 inches long. Fold the fabric lengthwise right sides together and stitch in a 1/2 inch seam. Then press the seam open with the tip of your iron. Put a safety pin through one layer of the fabric and push it down through the center of the tab, all the way down to the other end. Pull it out through the other end to turn it right side out, and then press the tab flat, making sure to center your stitching line in the middle of the tab, which is going to become the center back of your tab. Now fold your tab in half with the seam on the inside and pin it to the top of your unfinished valance as shown. It's ready to go. On to our 1/2-inch loop tab. For each loop tab, you're going to need a piece of fabric 2 inches wide by 7.5 inches long. Fold in each long end so they almost meet in the center of the fabric. Then fold the loop in half as shown, press it flat, and then stitch the long ends together close to the folds, making sure that you catch both the front and the back. Now fold the loop in half and pin it to the unfinished face of your valance as shown. All right, style number 3 is our bow tie. For each bow, you're going to need a piece of fabric 3 inches wide by 27 inches long minimum. If you want longer tails than what's shown in this picture, then you're going to want to lengthen the length of your fabric accordingly. For the bow tie, you're going to fold your fabric right sides together. You're going to stitch both your long end and short ends in a 1/4 inch seam allowance. But on this one, leave an opening about 1/2 of an inch wide, centered right in the middle of your strip as shown. Now on your short ends, trim your seam allowances close to your stitching and clip your corners. Then use a long stick or pencil and push the fabric from one end up through the tube and have it come out through that 1-inch hole you left in your long side, in the center of your long side. Then do the same thing with the other end. Pull it all the way out until you have the whole tube turned right side out. I use a pin to help pull out the sharp corners on my short ends, and then all you do is press it flat. Now fold the tie in half and pin it to the top of your unfinished valance as shown. Next up is our tie top valance. In order to make the long narrow ties, you'll need a 2-inch wide by 27-inch long strip of fabric for each tie. You start by pressing in a 1/4 of an inch onto the wrong side of each tie as shown, and then press your long edges in towards the center just like you did for your loop. and then you will press the entire narrow tie closed. A little tip, a little tool that I often use when I'm making long narrow ties is a bias tape maker. This little device comes in a variety of widths and sizes in order to make different size bias tape. And if you're making a lot of ties, this is a real time saver. You pull the fabric through the device and it actually folds the long edges towards the center for you. As you're pulling it out of the device, you just press it with an iron and your edges are perfectly folded in towards the center, and then it's super easy to just fold them in half after that. So real good little tool, a little device to use if you're making lots of long narrow ties. Now just top stitch real close to the fold on your long edges and your ends, and fold your tie in half and pin it to the top of the valance as shown. I like these long narrow ties because I think they can have lots of different looks. You can knot them at the top of the fabric for the valance. You can knot them at the top of the rod. You can tie them in bows. And you can use even different kinds of cording and string and ribbons instead of using fabric. So it's a pretty versatile way to suspend your valance. The next one we're going to do is the gathered tab. For each gathered tab, you need a piece of fabric 10 inches wide by 7.5 inches long. You'll fold it right sides together so that it is on the fold finished at 5 inches wide by 7.5 inches long. And you'll stitch it in a 1/2 inch seam allowance, pressing open the seam on the center back just like you did for the standard tab. Now turn it right side out and press it flat with the seam on the center back. Now fold it in half and put a couple pins in to hold it in place. Next, thread a needle with a double layer of thread and make sure you have a good, strong, secure, large knot at the end of the thread. And you're going to just do a running stitch as shown here along the bottom of your tab, maybe 1/4 of an inch away from the raw edge. Do that all the way across until it looks like this, and then pull it up tight, distribute your gathers, and tie it off in a knot and clip your thread. And now this one's ready to pin to the top of your unfinished valance. This one's kind of fun because you can do a whole bunch of different things to these gathered tabs to change the look of them. You can use ribbons or trim or rope or a variety of things to make little bows and ties to make it look like that's what gathers it up. That's a pretty cute option. All right, last up is our button tab. For each button tab, you'll need a piece of fabric 5 inches wide and 9.5 inches long. You'll make this one just like you made your classic tab. Fold right sides together, stitch along the long edge in a 1/2 inch seam allowance, and press open your seam allowance with the tip of your iron. Now center your tab with your seam facing up, still wrong side out, and if you just want a square bottom tab, button tab, just stitch right across the bottom in a 1/4 inch seam allowance, as you can see the stitching line here. If you'd like to have a pointed tab, then I take a piece of notebook paper or anything with a nice right angle on it, and I fold the paper just like this with the fold of the paper lined up to the stitching line. And when you open up the paper, you just trace around that angle and stitch right on that line, and you'll have a perfect pointed tab if you do it that way. Then trim close to the stitching line and clip off your corners, and use that same little stick or ruler to turn it right side out. Then press it flat, and your seam should be on the center back at this point. And pin it to the unfinished top of your valance like this, and it should look like this, where the seam is actually facing down. That way when your valance is finished and you flip it up like this, the seam is going to end up inside the tab. Now fold your tab down onto the front of your valance. I usually go about 2 inches past the top like this, pin it in place, and then I'll usually do a machine tack like this, a little X or a little line. And now just sew your button over your little stitching mark, and you're done. And if you have the kind of button that doesn't have holes in it, if you have a fabric covered button or another kind of decorative button, you can even hot glue it. It's never going to take any stress, so it's only decorative. So you can glue it or sew it in place. And how cute is that? So there you have 6 different ways to suspend your little valance. So cute, so versatile, and so easy. And as I mentioned before, if you'd like the tutorial on how to make this valance from start to finish, I'll link again to it right here. And if you like my channel, please subscribe. I have lots of great videos on here with a lot more to come. Thank you so much for watching, and happy sewing.